So one of my favorite parts of the Churchland and Churchland article is the Luminous Room thought experiment. I think it's a really good thought experiment for lots of reasons, or a really good example for lots of reasons. So to refresh your memory, the idea is that we have this guy in a room and he's shaking an electromagnet back and forth, and that's generating electromagnetic waves. And the thought is, oh, well, surely that's not going to light up the room. And so light cannot be just a series of electromagnetic waves. Light has to be something else. What is it? We don't know. That's very confusing. But whatever light is, it's not electromagnets. And so this would disprove, for instance, Maxwell's theory that light and electromagnetic waves are identical. And a lot of the questions on Canvas about Churchland and Churchland were about the luminous room in various ways. So for instance, we have this question, which is, look, so the luminous room thought experiment is supposed to hurt Searle because this is a room where apparently there's no light, and so this disproves that light is electromagnets, but we know that light is electromagnets. So, but the point is, oh, well, look, we can come up with an example in the other direction. So we come up with a video and it's just a bunch of still images flipping past. And so does this demonstrate that a video is actually moving? And the answer is no, it is just an illusion. There aren't actually movement there. Or in this question, we saw this in one of the earlier videos, like this is pure speculation, the idea that somehow AI would be conscious if it just goes fast enough, or that there's consciousness in a very small amount, just like there's a small amount of light in the luminous room. That's just pure speculation. Is consciousness really similar to electromagnetism or not? This question, like maybe you can scientifically claim there's light in the room, but you can't really assume that there's light in the room or that there's consciousness going on. We don't understand consciousness. We saw this again in one of the earlier videos. And this question, which is, oh, well, Maxwell could say, oh, there's a tiny bit of light, just like the AI person could say there's a tiny bit of consciousness. But you could just say, oh, no, you need to shake it fast enough to get light. And so maybe you have to have a fast enough computer to get consciousness. So why not say that? So these sorts of questions. So these are all great questions. Let's start just at the last one, which is, oh, well, let's see. They say Maxwell could bite the bullet and claim quite correctly that the room is really is bathed in luminance, albeit a greater quality too feeble to appreciate it. So that there's just a tiny bit of light. You could say, no, there's actually zero light. You just have to shake it fast enough and you will get light, but there's no light until then. I think either way kind of works for the consciousness people. So you could say, yeah, a very like a normal computer or a slow computer, no consciousness. Very fast computer, consciousness. That's one option. Or you could say, no, very slow computer, very slow consciousness. I don't think either is better or worse. A lot of it just depends on what you think consciousness is. So if you think consciousness is, for instance, being able to see or being able to speak Chinese, then at some point, a computer that's too slow is not going to be able to do this. So a very slow computer isn't going to be able to run the visual program or whatever, or isn't going to be able to speak Chinese. This is maybe a less popular answer for slightly complicated reasons. So at least one or two of the articles raise the idea of a Turing machine. So a Turing machine is a machine that can run a certain program. Oh, I think Searle points this out when he points out that you can make a Turing machine out of anything. And so the thought is that if you have a program, you could sort of run it on any Turing machine, and so it would take a long time, but it could still run the program. And so if you think the program is what makes somebody conscious, then it shouldn't really be about speed. But again, these are two directions that the people could go. They could say, yeah, you just need a fast computer to be conscious. And I don't think that's a crazy answer. You could certainly, if our brain is not developed enough, we're not conscious. So if I wipe out 99% of my brain, I lose consciousness. You might think computers are similar. They just have to be fast enough to be conscious. So that's one sort of point, which is, yeah, you maybe don't want to go this direction for light. Like there is actually light when you shake the electromagnet, just a tiny bit of light. But you could go this direction for consciousness. And so similarly, some of the questions were pointing out the ignorance. So mostly this is covered in the first video where I talked about how Churchlands don't think you can just conclude from ignorance that there's no consciousness. And in fact, that's the point they make about the room. So they say, that's one point. They say, the luminous room experiment demonstrates nothing of interest one way or the other about the nature of light. So they're not saying the luminous room proves that light is electromagnetic waves. It certainly doesn't prove Maxwell's point. And they're not saying the Chinese room proves their point. They're just saying the Chinese room doesn't prove anybody's point. It doesn't prove Searle's point. It doesn't prove their point. And that's a problem for Searle because he's using it as an argument against them. So Searle is using it as an argument against them, but it doesn't prove anything. So this is sort of an argument that we are ignorant. They're accepting that we're ignorant. They're just saying, specifically, the ignorance isn't cleared up by the Chinese room. The Chinese room doesn't make us better off in terms of ignorance. We should be just skeptical of everything, and until we know that a machine can't be conscious, it seems reasonable to assume it could if it can do the same things we can do. So if it can speak Chinese, and we can speak Chinese, and those seem to be what it takes to understand Chinese, then why not? So they do reject the Turing test, so they don't think like just speech or whatever is important, but something similar, being able to do what we can do. They think, I don't know, if it's potentially consciousness, like why not think that it's consciousness? And so that's the same thing they'd say to this sort of point, which is, well, look, the luminous room could be misleading. It could be a misleading thought experiment. Maybe it's more like a series of film images, which seem like they're moving, but they're not. And then again, their point is that, yeah, the luminous room doesn't demonstrate anything. What is needed to settle the problem of light and the possibility of artificial luminance is an ongoing research program to determine whether the appropriate condition, under the appropriate conditions, the behavior of electromagnetic waves does indeed mirror perfectly the behavior of light. Similarly, what do we need to tell if AI is conscious? Well, we need a research program to determine whether under the appropriate conditions, the behavior of robots does indeed perfectly mirror the behavior of humans. And if you can get a robot doing exactly what a human's doing, then why not say it's conscious? If you can get an electromagnet shining in the room, just like you can get a light bulb shining in the room, why not say it's luminous? That's the thought. If you can build a machine that speaks Chinese, what reason would you have not to say it's conscious? Searle says he's got a reason, but they're pointing out, look, the luminous room, the Chinese room don't show anything.